Hey everyone, Jason here. We've got a really exciting episode for you lined up, super actionable. We are going to walk you through exactly how you need to go about finding and booking amazing guests for your podcast that match your ICP. Here we go. So one of the biggest questions that we get here at B2B Better when it comes to building effective podcasts is around guest strategy. Specifically, how do we find and how do we book great guests for our podcasts? And it makes a lot of sense because when you think about podcasting as a tool to drive pipeline, the idea of finding guests that match your ICP makes a lot of sense, right? And I want to caveat this because the idea of booking guests that are also potential customers to your podcast is a tried and tested strategy. But what we try and make really clear to the clients that we work with is if you are interviewing your guests, it has to be a value-led exercise. What you can't do is Trojan horse them. You can't invite them onto the podcast interview and then try and pitch them live on the call. It's a horrible experience. It's a horrible experience for them. It's a horrible experience for your audience if you ever decide to publish it. And ultimately, it's going to be a horrible experience for you because it's going to hit your reputation and this person's never going to want to talk to you again in the future, right? So that's the first caveat. When you are using podcasts as a channel to meet and network and nurture your prospective leads, it has to lead with the content first and creating a great content experience for everybody. So with that out of the way, how do we find great guests? We think about it across a couple of different channels, right? So when you're first launching your podcast, the most natural place to look is your immediate network, the network of your executives, the networks of your employees, friends, partners, colleagues, customers, anyone that's already in your orbit who knows who you are and who would be willing to give you 30 minutes of their time for an interview is where you should start, because these are the people that are going to give you that early credibility so that when you do start reaching out to people that you don't have a relationship with, it's going to help them understand that this is worth their time. So first 3 or 4 guests, start with the people you already know. Then move on to your prospect lists. So go into your CRM, HubSpot, Salesforce, wherever. Look for potential customers that, if you are adopting a ABM strategy for your podcast, this is, look for the potential customers that have maybe lapsed as prospects that you haven't had any engagement with for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and use the podcast as a mechanism to re-engage them and try and book them on your podcast. Other places that you can look, LinkedIn is amazing for finding potential guests. Using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, playing around with demographic and firmographic criteria to really drill down to your guest ICP is a natural place to go. And then also looking at tools like Apollo, Clay, and other traditional lead gen tools is a natural next step. A couple of sleeper channels that you might want to look at. Slack communities and Slack groups, particularly if you are creating an industry-specific podcast, are a really amazing source of guests that typically will generate a high response rate against your outreach. It's easy for people to ignore emails, for people to ignore LinkedIn DMs, but if they're getting a direct Slack notification in a community that they are a part of, it's unlikely that they're going to totally ignore it. And we're seeing upwards of 60 to 70% response rates when going after guests in these targeted Slack communities. Another place that you want to look, speaker lists for conferences. If someone is speaking at a conference, if they're giving a keynote, then it stands to reason they would be interested in potentially coming on your podcast. And you can actually use that as a hook in your outreach message. Say something like, I saw that you were speaking at conference X. We want to talk to you about that on our podcast and dive into ideas A, B, and C a little bit further. So a combination of different sources to recap there. Start with your immediate network, friends and family of the business. Look in your CRM, look at the prospects and leads that have maybe lapsed that you want to invite onto your podcast as a way of re-engaging them. Use tools like LinkedIn and Apollo to very quickly build out target lists of your guest ICPs, and then activate the sleeper channels, Slack communities, LinkedIn groups, other online communities, and then the speaker lists of conferences that exist within your industry. So once you have then found your list of target guests, what do? How do you reach out to them? It goes back to basics. You start with LinkedIn and email. We like to keep the messages here at B2B Better when we're reaching out to prospective guests incredibly simple. So we're not trying to pitch the show or pitch the potential episode in message one. What we're trying to do is we're trying to introduce the guest to the fact that we have a show and to gauge their interest on potentially appearing on it. And so a couple of sentences, and we're going to drop the template of that initial message in the show notes of this episode, just introducing what the podcast is, why we're reaching out to this person in particular, and just asking them a simple question. Do you want information, more information, or not? In the second message, that's when you can start developing out the specific episode outline. So once they have expressed an interest and they've given you permission to start pitching them on coming on the show, you can then start unpacking things like the reasons why they would want to come onto the show. For instance, you get great downloads, or you interview amazing guests that they would be sitting alongside. Possibly you may be even considering paying them. But once they've expressed the interest, you can start really reinforcing the idea of why this is worth their time. And then the second thing you want to do is you want to start building out what this potential episode could be, right? And this is when you want to start getting into personalization. What specifically is it about this person, their experience, their story that is going to make them a great candidate for this podcast? And what we're doing here is we're reinforcing to the guest that this isn't some random outreach. This isn't some thinly veiled sales attempt. This is a value-led content exercise. We are really interested in what it is that they have to say and what they can share with our audience. What we've found is that if you can just adopt these two simple steps against the right target list of gauging initial interest and then reinforcing the value, you can get amazing response rates and book on amazing guests, even if you are a brand that has little or minimal audience already, booking guests from high profile, big name organizations. And again, we're going to drop the templates that we use in our outreach in the show notes of this episode. So if you have any other more questions about guest outreach and guest booking, we're more than happy to help. We've got our contact information in the show notes of this episode, and just let us know what you think.